The halls of justice often echoed with the weight of heavy hearts and the complicated tangles of human relationships. On this particular morning, the atmosphere in the courtroom of case number 3046 was thick with a history that spanned nearly 2 decades. The air felt charged not with malice, but with the weary exhaustion of 2 people who had reached the end of a long and winding road. Miss Jill Wyatt stood on one side, her eyes reflecting a mix of hope and trepidation, while Mr. John Moore stood on the other, maintaining an air of casual indifference that masked the complexity of his situation. The bailiff called the court to order with a voice that commanded immediate respect. "All rise," he announced, and the room became a vacuum of silence as the honorable judge entered. There was a certain grace in the way justice was administered here, a sense that beyond the legal arguments, there was a search for the simple, unvarnished truth. "Have a seat, please," the judge said, her voice both firm and inviting. She looked down at the papers before her. The case of Wyatt versus Moore. The judge began by addressing Miss Wyatt, seeking to establish the foundation of this long-standing connection. She asked how long the two had known each other, and Miss Wyatt replied with a softness that hinted at many shared winters and summers. They had known each other for about 18 years. It was a lifetime for some, a significant portion of existence for anyone. They had lived together on a couple of occasions, most recently in January of the year 2022. They lived in a house, an arrangement made without the formal constraints of a paper lease, based instead on a verbal agreement with another person. However, the narrative began to shift as Mr. Moore spoke. He claimed a different reality, one where they had never truly lived together as a couple. He spoke of having a girlfriend during the entire period, suggesting that his presence in Miss Wyatt's life was more fleeting than she remembered. The judge, with her keen intuition, sensed a reluctance in Miss Wyatt to share the full scope of the information, perhaps out of a lingering desire to protect what once was. The conversation turned to a specific house in January of the year 2022. Mr. Moore denied living there with Miss Wyatt, stating he lived there with his girlfriend. Yet, under the judge's persistent questioning, the truth began to emerge like a slow sunrise. He admitted that Miss Wyatt had stayed there, but claimed she had left after a disagreement with a neighbor upstairs. The judge, ever the observer of human logic, noted that one would not know they did not get along with a neighbor unless they had actually spent time living in the space. Miss Wyatt was not telepathic. The judge remarked with a touch of dry humor, highlighting the absurdity of the denial. Eventually, the truth was acknowledged. Miss Wyatt had moved from that house into a trailer she was renting. This trailer became a central point of the dispute. In the year 2022, Miss Wyatt found herself facing a period of incarceration. She had been convicted of a crime that she described with a surprising degree of honesty and a touch of humility. She had stolen a Thanksgiving dinner in the year 2018. It was a detail that added a layer of human struggle to the case, a reminder of the desperate choices people sometimes make during the holidays. She ended up serving 78 days in the year 2022 because she had violated her probation by failing to keep in contact with her officer. During those 78 days, she entrusted her life and her finances to Mr. Moore. She gave him her phone, which held the keys to her bank account and her ability to communicate with the outside world. She believed he would take care of her expenses, her rent, and her utilities. Mr. Moore acknowledged receiving the phone, though he claimed his primary purpose was to provide her with money for the commissary and to keep up with her belongings. The judge delved deeper into what it meant to keep up with some stuff. It included phone bills and a computer purchase. But then a new element was introduced. Mr. Moore claimed that Miss Wyatt wanted him to stay in her trailer while she was away so she could keep track of him. It was a complex dynamic, involving a car and a phone as tethers between 2 people. Mr. Moore's girlfriend, understandably, was not fond of this arrangement. The judge questioned why Mr. Moore did not simply refuse the responsibility, especially since he was living with another woman. At this point, the story took a poignant turn with the introduction of Miss Wyatt's son, Andrew Porter. Andrew stood tall and capable, a field engineer who worked out of state, but was clearly a responsible adult. The judge looked at Andrew and then back at Miss Wyatt, pointing out the irony of the situation. Miss Wyatt had a perfectly normal, trustworthy son to whom she could have assigned the task of managing her bills. Yet, she had chosen Mr. Moore. It was a lesson in the complexity of human trust, the way we sometimes lean on those who are the least stable because of the history we share with them. The dispute over the money became the focus. Miss Wyatt alleged that Mr. Moore had taken a couple of $1,000s from her account, while he had provided about $781 for her commissary. The remainder was unaccounted for. Mr. Moore claimed there was still $600 in the account when he returned the phone, but he lacked the documentation to prove it. He spoke of Cash App transactions and rent for the month of August, but the details remained blurry. Then came the matter of the car. Mr. Moore had driven Miss Wyatt's car while she was in jail, claiming his own truck was filled with work equipment. He drove it just one block before the alternator failed, leading to the car being impounded. The judge found the logic of leaving a car to be impounded simply because it broke down in a driveway to be quite baffling. She noted that a responsible person would have called a tow truck to take the vehicle to a repair shop rather than allowing it to be taken by the city. The plot thickened when Mr. Moore explained how he retrieved the car from the impound lot. He claimed it cost $1,000 to get out, but he had done so by retitling the car in his own name. He admitted to having the title because he had access to Miss Wyatt's trailer. The judge, with a look of stern realization, pointed out that for a car to be retitled, a signature must be forged or signed over. Mr. Moore claimed it was already signed over to him because he sold cars, but his earlier testimony about being a field engineer contradicted this. The judge saw through the inconsistencies. She recognized that the money used to retrieve the car had come from Miss Wyatt's own account. It was her money paying for his mistake of letting the car be impounded. Mr. Moore's counterclaim for $2,000, based on an allegation of false arrest, was the next piece of the puzzle. He described an evening in February when they both ended up at the same bar. He claimed Miss Wyatt pressured him to leave, and when he refused, a scene ensued that led to his arrest for domestic violence. However, the legal documents told a different story. The case against him had been dismissed in the interest of justice because he had agreed to pay Miss Wyatt restitution in the amount of $246 for a pair of broken eyeglasses. By signing that agreement and paying the money, he had essentially acknowledged his role in the incident. The judge dismissed his counterclaim with a sense of finality. In the end, the judge provided a moment of profound clarity. She recognized that this was a case of misplaced trust and complicated history. She awarded Miss Wyatt $1,000, the amount that had been taken for the impound fees and other unaccounted expenses. As the court adjourned, the participants walked away with different perspectives. Miss Wyatt felt a sense of relief, a validation of her struggle. Mr. Moore, ever the survivor in his own mind, continued to see himself as the victim of circumstances. Outside the courtroom, a final observation was made that captured the essence of Mr. Moore's character. He had described himself as being monogamously challenged. It was a line that was both humorous and deeply revealing. It explained the tangled web of relationships and the lack of clarity in his life. The story ended not with a grand tragedy, but with a quiet lesson. It was a reminder that the people we choose to trust define the quality of our lives. Miss Wyatt, despite her past mistakes, had a son who represented stability and a future. She could now move forward, leaving the chaos of the past 18 years behind her, fueled by a new understanding of self-reliance and the value of surrounding oneself with those who truly have our best interests at heart. The light of the afternoon sun hit the courthouse steps as she walked down them, a free woman in more ways than one, ready to write a new chapter of peace and integrity.